probably
Uh,
just a matter of time before you take all of these and everything else that we've done or written or said, and you just create a Robert LLM,
no,
and
it
I
exists.
you don't need
It
me
exists.
anymore.
It exists. Don't say one day. It's here.
I'll look a lot better, when the
Certainly they
Robo Robert
are
is there.
the equivalent of Robert LLM. So a friend of mine, Alex Epstein, has an Alex AI, which he's an expert on fossil fuels and climate change and stuff like that. And you can ask it a question, and it's being trained on his stuff, and it will answer as if it's him, based on his material. And then yesterday I saw where, well, now they can mimic your voice almost perfectly, as Scarlett Johansson kind of figured out with OpenAI. And then they can mimic your video. They can create a video of you and mouth it as if you're speaking. So if you combine the specific AI that represents you with the video and the audio, it's done. I keep threatening my audiences that soon it's not going to be me on screen. It's going to be my AI clone.
Well, you enjoy that too much to give it up, but it would be nice to be able to send your AI clone to, and we've talked about assistants, but what you really want is an assistant who looks like you and talks like you. You can send them to all the boring meetings. Um,
Absolutely. A meeting clone. That's what I need. I need to train the clone on my behavior at meetings, nod appropriately, shake the, particularly
yeah.
Zoom meetings. That would be perfect. Anyway, we wanted to talk about AI today. We will come back to this topic soon. This is going to be a big part of what we talk about in Ingenuism. I have a feeling over the years to come, as AI just gets better and has a bigger and bigger impact on the world. But given that we haven't talked in a long time, we thought today we'd talk about kind of a reminder, refresher on what Ingenuism is and why it matters. So let's start with the what. What is, and the related, the what and the why. What is Ingenuism?
Well, at its core, Ingenuism is a model of how progress happens, where progress is defined broadly. It's not technological progress. It is technological progress, but it's not just technological progress. And the model is that it's the product of the connection that you have and the learning that you do. And this is true at a societal level. If society is highly connected and people are learning rapidly, you're going to have a lot of progress. And it's true all the way down to the individual level, the organizational level, all the way through. And when I say true, I mean the model applies to it. We're not claiming that this is the absolute truth, but it is really important because both the fact that it's a product tells you that if you're not connected, then learning isn't very powerful. And that if you're learning, I mean, if you're not learning, and even if you're connected, you're not going to have any progress. It doesn't just happen spontaneously. And of course, that's kind of a tautology, because learning is, in the Ingenuism world, is not what we typically think of as learning, where you learn facts that other people have
Kind of
discovered, and
rote learning, yeah.
or even, yes, even if you're thinking about it, until you make that next leap and come up with some, practical, valuable insight that can be added to the body of knowledge, then you're not learning. You're actually getting more connected as you learn in a more traditional sense. So both the fact that it's a product and then the distinction of what exactly learning is, I think, are unique in the way that Ingenuism presents how progress happens, and then you can apply it to whatever you want to apply it to, whatever's important to you, whether it's you individually or your organization, or in theory, although I'm not holding my breath, policymakers could be applying it to how we organize the rules of society.
They seem to have studied Ingenuism and decided to do the exact opposite.
It does sometimes seem that way, sadly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching the avalanche of regulations that it seems that this administration wants to pass before they might be out of office. And it's just stunning. So make the connection between Ingenuism and progress. So that is, why is it that Ingenuism actually leads to progress? What is it about progress that requires, if you will, Ingenuism?
Well, it comes down to the new insights that people generate and how those insights spread through society. So you don't get progress if you keep doing the same thing the same way. That's the definition of static. And I'm not saying that there aren't times where static makes sense, but that's not progress. So you're doing something new, you're doing something better. Now, how you discover new things is a big question for progress, because it both happens spontaneously, but it doesn't happen without any effort or anyone involved. It's not magic. It just seems that way sometimes. And so when you have learning that's happening, you're talking about new ideas, new insights, and that are effective and practical and really make a difference. You have to actually be testing them to discover that. So how you see how Ingenuism works in terms of progress is people are trying things, and a lot of things don't work out the way that we think they will. And that's absolutely fine, because that's how we learn. We don't learn by always getting things right. We learn by making errors and discovering new ideas and then testing them and getting feedback until we get something that actually we find does work really well in a proven empirical sense. So, and that's why, I'm also, maybe it's for a different reason, but I am also a taken aback and a little disgusted by what's happening with the push of regulation. If you only have this window, we're just going to get as much out as we can. But the whole point of progress is that you would be able to try things, because neither of us are going to say zero regulation is necessarily where we would want, or what would be the optimal for people to be able to accomplish their goals. And if you don't have feedback, if you don't have learning, if you don't have the opportunity to try things, and then when they don't work out, try something different, well, then you don't get any progress.
So why does regulation stop learning? Because I think a lot of people don't quite see that connection.
Well, when I talk about learning, I'm talking about learning about regulation. So, if you're trying to evolve a body of regulation that is going to be effective, you would need to be ongoingly trying new things, collecting feedback, doing major things at a small scale, so you actually get some idea of whether they're working the way you thought they were, or whether they're not working, or there are unintended consequences. And so that's just not what we're seeing today. But then the regulation itself damages, if it's regulation that gets put on the books and then just sits there, which is what we have. You basically never see. And there was one of the reasons that the first Trump administration, I think, was successful, despite doing a bunch of things that I think are insane, is that they were actually taking out some of the rules that have been put in place in the past and had proven to not be effective. And they're things that sound good, but that don't work. So if you have low flush toilets, but everyone flushes them twice, they don't save water. And it's those kind of regulations. And unfortunately, there are probably millions, but there are certainly tens of thousands, they don't take the feedback, they don't get reevaluated, and they don't get revised to actually accomplish the goals that they're purported to be trying to accomplish.
And we do differentiate between kind of government regulations and regulations that the industries impose on themselves and kind of voluntary regulatory regimes, which tend to be more flexible because there's a feedback mechanism from whoever, from the industry itself.
I think that's basically all of it. That the government regulations, there is the potential for it to be captured, that is to be intended, not admitted to, but to be intended to benefit one party at the expense of another. But you see the same thing in private regulations. Any group, there's going to be politics in terms of how you settle on a final answer. But the difference is that there is a feedback loop, and there is a cost. There's a punishment, if you will, to having the wrong rules in place. And Ingenuism is all about finding the right actions, to finding the right rules, finding the right policies, finding the right ways to organize your business, but by continuously getting feedback and continuously trying new things and improving.
Yeah, I mean, I think California is right now considering passing law regulating AI, which actually could criminalize, programmer behavior in some circumstances. And God, talk about trying to kill a golden goose, right? I mean, the state of California survives by taxing these businesses and encouraging and these businesses attract people, and yet they're really trying to restrain AI, a brand new industry that even if you said, okay, there's some control, we don't know enough about it to even start restraining it at this point.
It is ironic that the state of California, which has benefited, as a government entity, the most from Ingenuism or things that are like Ingenuism, that basically are Ingenuism, whatever name you want to call them, is so, I'm going to use the word arrogant, to think that it can just make rules that are not untested, are not well thought through, or even when they are well thought through, they're fraught with unintended consequences. And the state is big enough that those rules, end up impacting the entire planet. A much less important, but along the exact same lines, is the state is currently considering making it required that cars have a warning beep that goes off when you're speeding. So if you go more than, now that cars kind of know, with nav systems, they know where you are and they know how fast you're going and they know what the speed limit is on that road. And if you're going 10 miles per hour above the speed limit, the car would start nagging you to slow down. Now, I can see that, there's reason to think that that's a good idea, because it's definitely the case that speeding is going to, cause, particularly excessive speeding by definition, is going to cause accidents. And you just have to put yourself in the car when you're speeding along and suddenly this beep is going off, which you've never heard before because this is new. What's going to happen? I don't know, but I would certainly like to have it tested on a small scale before it's basically applied to 330 million Americans. I mean, there's definitely evidence that the signs that say there have been 23 fatal accidents on this road in the last year,
Cause accident.
that they are associated with higher accident rates. Now, I don't know that that evidence is robust, but there's certainly no reason to think that that effort has made the roads safer, and that possibly has made them less safe. So you've got
Yeah.
to try things, you've got to gather data, you've got to take the feedback and not just live with wishful thinking.
Well, I know what would happen if I was driving and that beep went off. It would go off, first of all, very often. And I would just get pissed off. So to the extent that I'm a better driver when I'm really angry, I probably not.
Yeah,
Probably.
that would be
As it
unusual.
is, my car tells me periodically that I need to take a coffee break.
And
And I'm
it
not happy by
pisses you
that.
off.
It makes me
No.
happy. It actually has a little picture of a coffee cup that comes up on the screen. It says take a coffee break.
And then you're like trying to figure out, what is that? Is that some kind of warning light? Am I in,
Oh, I figured it out at some point, and and it only
but
pisses me off every time I see it.
but when
But,
these
but
things
yeah.
are first introduced, it's a real distraction.
Oh yeah.
Where we have is basically for all cars at this point, you have to do stop start because you have to get to the EPA's mileage requirement somehow. And the way that they uh, calculate the EPA mileage, stop start is a real advantage because they have you stop for 30 seconds and go. It's a well-defined test. And of course, there's nothing like that. Like you're trying to go through a gate and enter a code and you stop for 1 second, your car shuts off. And it's super annoying. And so when I got the first car with stop start, I was like, okay, how do you turn this off? And it turns out that there is a way to turn it off, but
Yep.
you don't think of it. So you're in the car and then it starts doing stop start and you're going, I want to turn this off, but I can't remember. So you're trying to figure, it's a terrible idea. Even if you say, oh, well, we'll give people the opportunity to turn it off, you should give people the opportunity to have it or not, because it's something that uh, is going to have high costs at the beginning. But now we're going off in a different direction. But the
Yep.
point is, maybe having a speed warning is a big positive. It makes the roads a lot safer. But I wouldn't assume so, and I'd like to see a lot of evidence before you start mandating that.
Yeah, or whether you need it mandated at all, it seems like car makers would have that incentive as well if it really is good. So Ingenuism is about progress. It's about connection. Talk a little bit about connection. We talked a little bit about learning. What is connection? How do you think of connection, and what is the value with connection?
Connection is access to other people's knowledge and their ideas, and it's both because in school, when traditional school, we learn a lot of other people's knowledge. We learn calculus as it is developed by Newton, hundreds of years ago, and then we don't have to go through all of the steps of developing calculus on our own. We can take it and use it um, right out of the box, and so that's really valuable. But it's just the first part of connection, being connected to people's ideas. We actually start getting to progress and not just preparing for progress, which is how you would think of the first phase of learning. People's ideas both spark your own ideas, and it's often important to be able to combine them to actually produce something that makes a difference. The famous example is Gutenberg, who wanted to automate the manufacture of books essentially. But how do you do that? Well, you needed to have some way to both make the type economically, but then also to get the presses working, the printing press working correctly. And the ideas came from stamping coins and from making wine. The things that had an element of what he needed, he was able to draw on. And so even when you're talking about ideas, having the access to other people's ideas is very important. We often call this collaboration, and it does work best in both directions. It doesn't have the
Mhm.
biggest impact, but it can also work just in one direction. And that's one thing that a classic liberal education is supposed to give you, is access to ideas more than just facts, and how people have thought about things and questions they've asked, which is all very important when it comes to making actual progress.
Yes, it's this idea that 8 billion minds working on problems is better than one mind working on a problem. It's exponentially much more powerful.
And if you do the thought experiment, exactly that, if you have 8 billion minds and they're completely walled off from each other, so everyone's in their own room and they have everything they need to work, but they can't communicate with anyone else. How much is that 8 billion minds going to produce? Well, it's going to produce a lot because some people are really good at that kind of things. But then if you open a phone line between everyone so they can talk, it's going to produce more. You open an internet connection so you can Zoom, and as you increase the connection, it's very clear, not just theoretically, but in terms of looking at the history of progress, that supercharges what
Yeah.
those minds can produce.
And of course, the internet also connects you to all the knowledge of the past. So not just to other people, but also connected to the learning and the knowledge of people, everybody.
It gives you
Everybody who's
both
it's
dimensions of
being
connection.
documented. So it's another dimension that is added to all of that. All right, good. So we're going to be returning to some kind of schedule of doing these videos, applying the principles of ingenuism to a variety of different areas and fields, and digging deeper into the theory, but also applying it in a variety of different ways to a variety of different issues, all from this perspective of progress. And maybe it's important to say what we mean by progress is human progress. The human life gets better. Human beings have more opportunities to flourish and be successful in every dimension of their life, as I think you mentioned early on.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make that distinction and to say that it's not a particular human being, it's all human beings, but it's not as a group, it's as a sort of mass. And it's hard for us to wrap our brains around, but that really is what Ingenuism is all about. If you were to have a metric for, is Ingenuism happening here or is it not happening here? You would be looking at what people often call bottom up versus top down. You'd be looking at, do I really understand, like, is there a big plan here that's producing this progress? And that's, of course, the idea of regulation is some experts come together or even non-experts come together and they make a bunch of rules.
Yeah.
And then that's supposed to work well versus letting those rules evolve spontaneously. And it's hard to imagine in our complex society that things can evolve effectively spontaneously. It seems like someone would have to be in charge and it should come from the top. And if you look at all the examples, when it comes to the top, it almost never works well. And there are all of these amazing things that evolved basically spontaneously without a specific plan. Now, there were guidelines in place and people supporting it, and there were goals, but it wasn't dictated. It was generated ongoingly. And so, the internet's a good example, but we could go and list 1,000 examples. Even language that we're speaking, nobody came up and said, okay, well, this is going to be the language we're all going to use. It just evolved. And that's what Ingenuism allows for. That's really the hallmark of Ingenuism. So, if we're looking at something and we want to say, is Ingenuism being applied here? We look at whether it's top down or bottom up. And is it making people's lives better?
All right, excellent. So to be continued on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We will be back. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Yaron. Talk soon.
Bye.